Jeopardize our supper getting cold. We'll go through the slides, and then afterwards, during supper, after supper, whatever, we can have all the questions and conversation we want because we love to talk about the trip and answer questions. So we'll get right into it. If I can persuade somebody to reach up and turn on the slide projector for me. Oh, and I probably need to, the button is on the top, left, right, up higher, there, push forward.
Yeah.
One more.
Oh. I hit the wrong thing. I can't see anything. That went back. Do you want? Yeah, I can't see what is what. Oh, there, okay. I think it went back. Did it go back to the right one?
I think that's the right one.
We're not the only antiques in the room.
No, you're not.
These slides are, some of them, well, 45 years old, so anyway.
And there were 1,900.
We're all from that.
That's when you did the trip, was the 1900s?
No, this adventure began in 1965 when I was a student at a college field station on Basswood Lake in the Boundary Waters canoe area. The director there was a fascinating guy who had done his PhD research on ferns and mosses and bryophytes in the Boundary Waters and what became the Boundary Waters and Politico. He'd been there in the 1940s and had got acquainted with a guy named Sigurd Olsen, and you guys probably have heard of one of the instigators that helped get the Boundary Waters saved. So I got to know, or got to meet Sig a little bit, and fascinated by the canoe routes and canoeing and the North Country and the fur trade. And the fur trade is kind of the reason behind this story. There was one historian calls it the fur trade unrolled the map of Canada. In the wintertime, up in this area, Fort Chippewa and Lake Athabasca, the voyageurs and the Indians especially would trap animals for furs. In the spring when the ice went out, they would start down along the edge of the Canadian Shield with the rock formation that kind of makes this route possible. Eventually get to Lake Superior with their furs, July, at a place called Grand Portage. So, in the meantime, the Montreal Brigade would have been paddling the other direction from Montreal to Grand Portage with all sorts of essential provisions like whiskey, guns, pots and pans, and they would trade, the voyageurs would, from the North Country, would hand the furs off to the Montreal Brigade, where they'd take back to Montreal and then to Europe, and then the voyageurs would go back up with their trade goods and winter with the Indians again. So it was a fascinating route that they would take. One of the problems with the route, minor problem, was something called the Pigeon River, which made a Grand Portage, as they called it, around Lewis Falls on the Pigeon River, which the voyageurs had to do. It was only 9 miles. The voyageurs would each haul 2 90-pound packs on their back. They were each responsible for 6, so they'd have to make 3 trips over. We took about 2 steps with these packs, with 2 packs on the back, but we did hike the entire route. Got to the site of Fort Charlotte, which is on the Pigeon River at the end of the Grand Portage. You might notice that the sign is a little bit in the water there. That happened to be because the Pigeon River was in flood that spring, and it was a little bit high and muddy and challenging, and there were some portages that we never did find. We just made our own. Essentially. It took us about 2 or 3 days to hike on the Grand Portage. We finally got a sunny day and set off up the Pigeon River, thinking, oh man, we're on our way now. Got the Partridge Falls, appropriately named. There were grouse drumming around the area, but Partridge Falls we had to portage around. Finally got past Partridge Falls and up to what the Voyageurs called La Prairie, the meadow. The Voyageurs really liked this because that's where they stopped and drank up all the rum that they were supposed to be taking up to the meadow. So they didn't have to carry the stuff over the portages. We drank a whole lot of Weilers, if you know what Weilers is, Kool-Aid, out of the prairie. It got rained on. Did I say something about rain? Yeah, there was some rain on the Sturgeon River.
And there's no leaves on the trees yet.
Yeah, if you might have noticed, we started May 13th, so it was mid-May on the Sturgeon River. Kind of a cold and not real exciting trip. This far, we had some days of layovers and some days of trying to dry out and trying to stay warm and trying to find firewood that we could burn. The first part was kind of a tough spot. We finally got to the source of the Pigeon River at South Fowl Lake, which is where the Boundary Waters canoe area begins on the east end. We said, okay, we're in our good old familiar Boundary Waters. Now this is great. This is a significant portage, the height of land portage from South Lake into North Lake, where you cross from the Lake Superior drainage into the Hudson Spray drainage. So that from here, you're going downhill, right? So from there, we had a chance to dry out some of our wet throws and feel like we really were on a fun trip. This is what everybody thinks about the Boundary Waters, right? It's beautiful country. A few portages from there. And this is what the Voyageurs did on some of those. They would shoot the rapids. We weren't quite that adventuresome. We did shoot a few little ripples, but this was what we really liked to do, was get on the portage. Margaret's favorite. We spent a little bit more time in camp probably than the Voyageurs did. They supposedly would get up at, the story goes at 3 a.m. and paddle for a couple hours before breakfast, and then they would paddle at night or till dark. They'd stop every hour or so and have a pipe, smoke as they call it. And they measured their travel in pipes as far as how far they went. This time of year, finally, we were starting to see things like marsh marigolds, which is a pretty flower, except if you remember where it grows, and it happens to be the southern portage. But, cornuscan, Texas, bunchberry, moccasin flower, and when I saw this, my mouth started watering already. It was a couple of 3 months more before we saw it. We did take the time on the trip.
Oh, look at you. That's great. I love that. Oh, I love that.
A lot of history on this route. This is a Francis Hopkins painting of the pictured rocks of Crooked Lake. This is my version of the pictured rocks of Crooked Lake. Same inspiration. Why they call them pictured rocks? Some of you have probably seen the Indian paintings on some of the rocks, hundreds of years old when the Voyageurs were there 200 years ago. So the history was a little bit fuzzy to me on what the pictured rocks when they were there and why.
Oh,
Fascinating. Not so fun to find this kind of picture rocks. And other history, this one was a well-known campsite of the Voyageurs, Table Rock, on the Vasquez River, Crooked Lake area. A big flat rock of, 50 to 100 feet across is where they often camp and we stop there. The history was a fun part of it. Not quite so historic here. We got out of the Boundary Waters going west, and Beatty Portage going, into Loon Lake, I guess. For $6, they would have, for the fishermen with a powerboat for $6 back in 1971, they would have hauled your boat over for $2 only. They would have hauled our canoe over with the power motor-driven winch, but we just poured it. We weren't gonna spend $2.
The real thing.
Got into Loon Lake and then to Namakan Lake, where there's a place called the Kettle Falls Hotel. Has anybody been to the Kettle Falls Hotel? You can only get there by water. When we were there in 1971, it was in need of renovation, which I think has since happened. But the bar was kind of interesting. The story was the slope to the bar floor, so much of a slope that they said if you got too drunk, they would just roll you up.
Yeah.
We sort of laughed until I set my camera on the table and it started sliding. It was possible to turn off those top lights, I wonder.
Well, but
This, right?
It's really dark on that.
Oh, yeah.
That's really
is that okay?
one thing I didn't drag along on the trip was my flash, so I had to shoot this available light. This is Charlie Williams, was the wife of the proprietor at the Kettle Falls Hotel. She and her 4 assistants baked, I think, 20 or 30 loaves of bread a day.
Oh,
She was
that's
talking about how there were tourist customers and they had to bake bread. So she gave us a loaf of bread when we after we talked. Yeah, it was a treat. So, compared to our own home cooking. So I'll let Margaret explain a little bit more about home cooking.
This is our campfire set up with our reflector oven in the back behind the grate. We had 2 skillets. One was usually with bacon or fish in it. The other one we put in the oven. So we baked biscuits in it, or I had some cornbread. Cornmeal, we baked cornbread. And the other pot probably has noodles or rice. And they had chocolate or pudding. We had another
Mom, can you
sandwich.
speak up a little?
toward us more.
I turned toward you.
Yeah.
Bacon. We took bacon.
We took slab bacon. It would keep if we put it on the bottom of the pack, and it was at the bottom of the canoe, and it would be cold from the water in the lake, and it would keep for a couple weeks.
A lot of bacon too.
And then you try and eat with your head down. You try and cook, and you know how you like to lick your fingers when you're cooking, and it's really hard to do.
So you pray for wind to keep the bugs away.
There you go.
And with a little luck, a lot of luck, if the wind
Yeah.
happens to be going in the right direction.
What are those blue?
That's a poncho.
Oh, it's a poncho horse.
Rigged up with on a stick with on a paddle with a stick across.
Done that with
We did this occasionally,
Just, once in a
just
while.
for a break. So, we eventually we're going on the Rainy River to what we called Fort Francis International Falls. The Voyageurs just found little falls there, didn't worry much about it. Portaged around it. We had to deal with pulp mills and industry and highways and road traffic, and finally found somebody who would haul a dam. Oh, I forgot the dam. Who would haul our gear and canoes around the dam in the city for us to a motel.
The first night in the motel.
How far into your journey are you? How many days?
This is about a little over a month, I think.
We did 109 days total.
Motel rocks, probably.
But, yeah, we stayed in the motel, and our friend Wade got first shower, and he was so in need of hot water that nobody else got a hot shower.
We had to wait for morning.
But from the motel, we went to the Wheel Inn for supper, and if you've been to Canada, it's not a drive-in, it's a Wheel Inn. So that's where we had our supper, so we had a restaurant meal. Portage down to the scenic Rainy River, below the pulp mill, below the sewage treatment plant. But the good news was the Rainy River was going our direction, so it was downstream. So
that's
a lot
good.
of well,
Farming country.
farming country, a little bit of diversity in wildlife along the river. We kind of enjoyed that part, but we did not drink the water.
No.
Instead, we stopped at some farms and asked them if we could use, they could give us water, which they did.
This was Ron Klusterman and his wife Dora, and they had 3 kids. 2 of them were adopted. They were half Ojibwe Indians. And their little girl was just 5, and they were enamored with us. He gave us a dozen eggs too, as well as, you know, and a cake. And we ate the eggs for breakfast the next morning, and the little girls were down there, and they helped us crack the eggs, all dozen.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's good.
All dozen that morning.
Ron Klosterman was from the Netherlands originally, but he came over to Canada to set up his dairy operation. The next day we got into some Canadian pioneers almost. Say his name,
Charlie.
yeah, Charlie McDonald.
Charlie McDonald, and his wife. We never found out her first name.
His parents homesteaded here in 1892, I think it was.
From Eastern Ontario.
Yeah. And they got electricity in 1970.
Ooh.
The year before.
And the first thing she got was an iron.
Well, she deserved it.
But she still used her cook stove. And she made us some really good muffins for breakfast this morning. I would have called them cupcakes. They were so sweet, but they were her muffins.
Friendly people. Worked our way on down the Rainy River, eventually to the Lake of the Woods. There are quite a few fishing resorts and fishermen on Lake of the Woods. Also a lot of water on Lake of the Woods, which we had to kind of zigzag our way between islands and pick the non-windy days to do it. But got to see some interesting including a bear, which kind of surprised us. He was swimming across between some islands, and we got up very close to him. You can see then civilization raised its head again. We got into closer to Kenora at the other end of the Rainy River, and real estate signs popped up on the islands. You know, they were trying to sell home sites or vacation cabin sites. Paddled into Kenora on a Sunday afternoon with the power boats zooming around. But unfortunately, there was a parking space left for us at the Safeway grocery store where they had boat docks. Boats. So we stocked up on more groceries at Kenora and camped in the bay at Kenora to the sound of the city and traffic. And we're kind of glad to eventually get out then onto the Winnipeg River, out the other end. It looked like a great river to travel. Had our first Hudson's Bay Company stop at Monocacy, which was just down the Winnipeg River.
Look at the car.
Okay, who can name the year and model of that car?
I don't know, but
It's old like us.
I can't tell you either. I think it might have been an Olds and it might have been late 60s, early 70s. I'm not sure.
I do too.
60s with the wind.
Well,
Hudson's
50s
Bay
or
Company
60s.
was kind of our savior for a lot of the trips. So.
Ooh.
Except red sun in morning, this is a sunrise, should have been a warning to us about the Winnipeg River, which the voyageurs knew for rapids. We knew for some late nights when we paddled to avoid the wind, some foggy mornings on reservoirs that were there because they had built power dams on the Winnipeg River, or hydro dams. The Ontario Hydro was the electric power company in Canada, a lot of it. I forget the number of power dams we had to portage around, but there were several. And not the most fun portages. We ran into a kayaker who we traveled with for a little while, and I'm not sure who was more surprised at him or us at, gee, there's somebody else doing this?
Yeah.
We got down to the end of the Winnipeg River at Lake Winnipeg. By then, my patched blue jeans that I'd started out with
Pretty bad.
wore out.
You pay $60 for
That's right.
I got some who wants to learn on these. I've got some more like them at home. But my jeans had wore out, and our friends had also worn out after all the Pigeon River challenges and the other challenges and the Winnipeg River challenges. And they decided, okay, they were ready to go back home, which they eventually did when we reached Lake Winnipeg. So that gave us a little time to kind of ponder our options of hanging around, photographing, waiting for boat schedules, and lo and behold, we discovered there was a cruise boat that goes up Lake Winnipeg. We waited a couple of days, and the Lord Selkirk came in, and yes, they would take us the 300 miles up Lake Winnipeg for only $47.50 per person, plus $10 for the canoe. So we didn't take us long to decide that was the way to do it.
They would do it in 24 hours.
You know, if you make 15 miles a day and that's 300 miles, don't do the math. We were glad to get on the boat.
There's a good reason.
We fell out of place.
Anyway, and when we got out on Lake Winnipeg, we were pretty glad that we were on the Selkirk and not in our canoes. And that's big water and it could get pretty rough. We talked to the captain of the boat and he said, yeah, it can get pretty rough.
And we did that day.
We got to Grand Rapids at the upper end of Lake Winnipeg, and there talked to the Manitoba Mines and Natural Resources folks, and they said sure they would haul us around our canoe and our gear around the power down there at Grand Rapids. So they threw our gear in the truck and hauled us up, and we got above the dam, and it was getting towards evening, so we decided to camp beside the lake, the reservoir. Woke up the next morning, and lo and behold, they shut the gates on the dam and raised the reservoir a couple feet, and so our fire grate down to the shore was underwater. Fortunately, we had camped up far enough that our tent wasn't underwater, so we learned something about reservoirs and power grids. It was kind of an interesting reservoir. There was some wildlife, a colony of terns there that we watched, and it wasn't all there. But the reservoir had just been built in 1962. This was 9 years later, 1971. So there was a lot of flooded timber around, and the river had become a big reservoir with a lot of big, wide open water. We were paddling across one hot, still, muggy afternoon, paddling across this reservoir. Stopped for I always got to have chocolate, so we stopped and had some chocolate in the water. Heard something funny, looked around and thought we could see something, got out the binoculars and could see the whitecaps headed our direction. Behind us, yeah. So we started paddling like crazy for the nearest land we could see, and in the midst of spray and crashing onto the rocks and logs, pulled up on what we later called Frustration Island. Because we spent 3 nights camping there waiting for the wind to go down. Not a spot. We weren't the only ones that were frustrated by Cedar Lake. The Cree Indians had a little village of Cedar Lake there. When the power dam went in, this was about all of their village that remained above water. Some of their cemeteries and their ancestral lands were flooded. The controversy was still going on into the 21st century. There were some lawsuits between the Cree Indians and Ontario Hydro about the dates they got forced off their lands 50 years ago. We finally were glad to be off of Cedar Lake and onto the Saskatchewan River. If any of you have looked at a map about the Saskatchewan River, it starts in the Rocky Mountains and flows through the heart of Alberta and Saskatchewan and wheat country. And I'm from Iowa, corn country, and so we kind of compared it to the Des Moines River with the muddy water, the high mud banks, and a lot of, I paddled down the Des Moines River. I don't really want to paddle up the Des Moines River like we did the Saskatchewan River. But campsites were kind of at a premium. We heard about a spot where there was a Mines and Natural Resources cabin, and you could find, if you climbed up the bank. Well, there happened to be a ladder there, and we climbed up the ladder, and lo and behold, there was a cabin. Of course, it was locked up, but there was a clearing above it. So we camped in the clearing by the cabin, and undeterred by the bear scratches that were on the door of the cabin, didn't have any bear problems there. But not too long after that, we stopped to investigate another abandoned cabin along the Saskatchewan River, and walked up, took a few pictures, walked back, and we heard something rattling, banging at the canoe. And I thought, well, gee, I poked, there's no wind, I poked the canoe up, I went down, and lo and behold, there was a bear in our canoe trying to get at the bacon grease container that was in the pocket of the roof back. Fortunately, we got back just in time. If you want to see the evidence, there's 2 holes in that balloon pack over there. From that but it didn't do any more damage than this. The other option was to camp on the sandbars, the mud bars, and the willows. That wasn't a real great camping spot either, but that was what you got on the Saskatchewan River. One Saskatchewan River adventure, we were paddling along, and there was a steep bank like that, and down right beside the water on a little ledge was a colt. And no path up or down, we couldn't figure out what had happened. So we decided, you know, I'm an old farm boy, we got out the rope and we lassoed the colt, and Margaret and I managed to manhandle the colt back up onto the pasture and hope that he found the rest of his herd. Never did figure out if he made it. We were very glad when we finally got to the town of Cumberland House, which is the, I think the oldest settlement, or the oldest Hudson's Bay settlement or company post in Saskatchewan, 1774, I think it was. So we spent another night in a motel there at Cumberland House. Happened to be a Saturday night, and it happened to be that there was a bar associated with the motel. And it happened to be that Saturday night in that area of the country, the natives, the whites, everybody comes in and has a good time at the bar. So it was a little bit loud, but it was a nice bed. The next day we wandered around a little bit the old historic Cumberland House village. Fairly primitive, but they had boardwalks, and the boardwalks, you figured they probably were there because if they weren't there, you would have walked in the mud. Then we made our way into, well, some people call it Sturgeon Lake. Nemu is the Indian word for, the Cree word for sturgeon. The Indians all call it sturgeon, the whites all call it Nemu. Sturgeon Landing, which was kind of the gateway to the Sturgeon River. Eric Morris or some of the other historians, Alexander McKinsey said, you know, the sturgeon is a nice river for going down, but you don't really want to go up. The French word, or the French name for the word for the Sturgeon River was Malines. You know your French, that's for wicked. Anyway, we started up the Sturgeon River. And, you know, this is kind of typical of Sturgeon, kind of a neat little river with a lot of fun portages, waterfalls, rapids, more portages.
And people.
And people, natives, but also some others, adventurers who didn't have as good a luck as we did. They were going down. I mean, at least they had the sense to go downstream. They didn't have the sense to portage some rapids and go straight portage. Yes, you look. This is a half of canoe here. We met one of their companions paddling the other half of the canoe later on. So they had made the wrong choice at rapids. Rain, you know, you get used to the rain after about so long, but we had our share of that as well on the Sturgeon River.
Oh, look at that.
Rain does have its benefits as well, I suppose. So, and there's some history along the Sturgeon River. We did see quite a few natives, a few settlements, Indian cemeteries, so it's not the wilderness deserted by any means. We found a few campsites, and the interesting thing about not only the Sturgeon River but others, this maybe is kind of an unusual picture because my sleeves are rolled up and I don't have the head net on. Usually, or often, we would cook and then hop into the tent so we could eat without the bugs eating us alive. This campsite was a little bit different in the town of Leaf Rapids, still in the Sturgeon River. Maybe you could make out the Texaco gas pump across the way and the road in between us and our, beside our campsite. We woke up at, I'm not sure what time, 5 a.m. in the morning as the trucks were rolling by on the road right beside the campground.
Yeah.
But we kind of liked this campground because there we were lucky enough to meet a guy named Peter Whitehead, who had an outfitting business on the Churchill River. He'd been involved in a 1967 Canadian Centennial canoe trip and had been all through this country numerous times. We started chatting and we told him about our trip and he said, "Why don't you get out your maps? Maybe I can help you." And he proceeded to name the different portages, campsites, rapids to be careful of, rapids you could wade, rapids you could, this isn't the portage trail here, it's over there, and really a very helpful guy. So we a blessing to have found Peter Whitehead.
It saved us a lot of time.
Oh, that's great.
The rest of the trip. Kept going on up the Sturgeon River to the little town of Pelican Narrows. This is your typical Hudson's Bay Company store of, I don't know, 100 years old or how old they would have been, but the white building and the red roof. The excavator over there on the left, we were told, was building a Bureau of Indian Affairs, was building building a laundromat for the Indians. And there were quite a few natives living there, but quite a few others would come into town for provisions, as we did. We told up our canoe, and there was an Indian trader canoe on either side of us. Little Indian kids thought we were real curiosities, so when we went up to the Hudson's Bay store, they came and hopped in our canoe and were playing with our paddles and our hats and our packs. We looked kind of askance at this, and the Hudson's Bay manager said, "Oh, don't worry, they won't hurt anything." And they didn't. They sure did have fun looking over our view. And the Sturgeon River and a lot of the country was kind of a land of contrast. Here we were in the village of Pelican Narrows and all the people around in the houses, and then you get a few miles out, and all of a sudden it looked like wilderness again, which it was. The Indians living in and making their living in the wilderness. And here's one of those Indians. His name was Angus Sinkler. We met him one evening in his little canoe. He was headed out, he said, to hunt a moose. And I think he looked at us with a little bit of skepticism because he was, first of all, probably wondered what we were doing traveling out there and then why we were going to be there and probably scared of moose that he'd have to hunt. But he was very friendly. We saw him the next morning. He hadn't got a moose. He got his zucker too. He slept all night in his canoe. And it's just kind of the way of life. Camping was a little bit different. The natives, this is kind of their home turf and where they live. And at a campsite, well, you probably don't want to come in my garage or my house and see the stuff I leave laying around. It's probably not fish heads and moose hides, but I do leave stuff around. We tried to be a little bit more careful about cleaning up our campsites than we did. We also avoided camping on islands. You wouldn't camp on an island this small anyway. But we were told that the Indians often would take their sled dogs out to an island away from their village in the summertime and leave them out there. If it was a big enough island, they might forage for their own, but a smaller island, they would bring food out to. But they said, be careful of the islands. If you're going to camp on an island, make sure that it's not a pack of dogs there. And at the portages, what the Indians used as well, they used them a little bit differently than we did. If you'll notice on the far left there's some skids, some logs, and they would drag their freighter canoes up and across the portages. They often would have logs the whole way. We tried to be very neat and have all our stuff in little loop packs and have a yoke on our canoe. And they would casually throw in a suitcase or two, and a shotgun or two, and a barrel of oil or two, and those kind of things. And just odds and ends of bundles of clothes, and they're casual about working their way across the portage. This portage, by the way, is Frog Portage, which is another historic one. This gets you from the waters of the Sturgeon River into the waters of the Churchill River. Well, it's only 300 yards, I think, across this relatively flat portage, but then you get into the Churchill, which is kind of a well-known canoeing river, and historically the Voyageurs liked it because it's a series of flat water lakes with a few minor little rapids in between. A couple of falls too. The snowy falls. They weren't all that tough. History in the Churchill River. This is the oldest standing building in Saskatchewan. An Anglican church built at Stanley Mission 1854 to about 1860. Fascinating, huge old building. You can see it looming up from miles away when you're coming into Stanley Mission. Beautiful stained glass windows. They had to persist to get the stained glass windows in the church because the first set were lost in the rapids as they were bringing them up. This is the second set. The missionaries had been in this area for maybe as long as the Voyageurs. Maybe they came with the Voyageurs in the 17 and 1800s. Has some of you seen the Father Barraga's cross on the north shore up north of the river? And this is Father Moreau, and I think his grave, but there were several places where we saw crosses up in this country as well. Stanley Mission, interior of the Hudson's Bay Company, fairly typical, I guess. But Mark, did we buy there?
I don't know what we bought. They had, if you didn't find it there, you weren't going to get it. That was the only place to get it.
Kleenex, Campbell's soup, shirts, socks, underwear,
Band-Aids.
peanut butter and jelly. These are probably some of the goodies we got from one of the Hudson's Bay Company stores.
This was our typical lunch. Peanut butter and jelly with summer sausage and cheese on Rye King crackers. And when we couldn't get Rye King crackers anymore, they had something they called pilot biscuits, which Larry called hockey pucks.
They were white, they weren't black like a hockey puck. Basically, took a lot of peanut butter for a hockey puck.
And then we also baked some elephant ears. It's flour and water and a little bit of sugar. You could bake it in the reflector oven. That held up peanut butter too.
A lot better than the pilot biscuit.
Portage.
The Voyageurs, they come in water like that, they would portage around, and we, of course, did, well, ones like this, the Voyageurs would shoot. I think on this one, we probably, this was Otter Rapids, one of the few bridges across the Churchill. We may have waded up this one, or portaged around it, but got by that one. This one, we obviously portaged. We saw some people who didn't take the obvious portage. They also got rained on, and they were scattered out. All their clothes, sleeping bags, and everything on this rock, trying to dry out. It was I think...
It was a minister in a youth group, I think. Eight kids and 14.
And they had a bit of a hard time otherwise, in addition to this, because one of their leaders had been flown out by a float plane from the Mines and Natural Resources people, came to find him after they were notified that his brother had died. And we were questioned to try to keep tabs with the Mines and Natural Resources offices. And we tried to do that, and check in when we went from place to place so they would know where we were in case of emergency. Speaking of portages, the Indians had it figured out on several of them. This particular one, they had a cart with, you maybe see the steel rails on the top of these logs in the cart, and they would put their big fishing boats or freighter canoes on this and wheel it across the portage. we decided to use it for our canoe, and that worked pretty well as too. You know, boats this size they would put on that cart and take across. This is Gerard Alexander. Anyway, this young Indian, he was pretty proud of his fishing boat that he used. He was a commercial fisherman there. Yeah, Gerard George was his name. His dad's name was Alex George, and I think Alex was even prouder of his canoe than Gerard was of his fishing boat, because Alex had made this canoe himself and had used it for years. He didn't use it anymore, but he still had it. He didn't speak English, but his son asked him if we could take his picture, and he was quite pleased that he got his picture. So, all Indians were quite that friendly. The little village of Pachumac, we stopped at the Hudson Bay Company and just got provisions, and were there at the dock. And as we were getting ready to go back to the canoe, a guy approached me and said, "You know, if I was cheap, you guys would be paying me money to float your canoe in this water by my village." And he was a little bit tipsy as well, but kind of belligerent. Well, humor him a little, so we talked a while, and finally it came up that he was mad at the rich white people for proposing a pulp mill at a place called Dory Lake in Saskatchewan. And I'd heard of Dory Lake, and I'd heard of the pulp mill, and so I told him right off, well, guess what, I don't think that pulp mill is a very good idea either, because they're going to be spoiling this country. Well, he decided that was okay, and we shook hands and parted friends. It was a little bit dicey there for a while. So, but, you know, it's kind of idyllic, you know, into the boundary waters, and you go on a canoe trip, and it's, you take pictures, and you enjoy the scenery, and pick blueberries from the scenic overlooks, and just, you know, this type of country, we love going back to it. Sit around the campfire, and just, tend to camp chores,
That's cute.
watch wildlife.
Oh, nice.
Our trip included a fair amount of that, you know, just watching the North Country, enjoying the sunsets. One thing our trip also included some fishing, fair amount of fishing, fair amount of berry picking, and a whole lot of eating.
That's red raspberries on the top, copper,
Nice,
and fish on the bottom. It may have been a walleye back then, but we ate the whole thing.
Fabulous. Oh, that's great.
This was probably second, so this by the time we got
They
there.
look wonderful.
When we finally got to the end of the road, not the road, of the trip, the little town of Eli Cross, which is on the lake by the same name, it was about 1,500 miles total on our trip, not as far as we had hoped to get, but 1,200 miles paddling. You know, the good news was we were back in civilization. Now the bad news was we were back in civilization. So, logistics, you say, okay, what did you do once we got there? Well, I got to back up a little bit. When we went up to Grand Portage in May, we had a college friend and his wife who piled all 6 of us and our gear in 2 canoes into my 1965 Belvedere Plymouth station wagon. Drove to Grand Portage. Gave him the keys to our car and said, have fun. Well, he drove back to Iowa. Gave the old Plymouth to another college friend who lived in Montana. He drove the old Plymouth out to Montana for the summer. About early part of July, or well, sometime in July, we wrote him a letter and said, hey, we hope to be at Eli Cross maybe about August 29th. Any chance you could meet us there? Well, we got into Eli Cross, went to the post office, and there was a letter from Pat. Excuse me. Yeah, we're going to be there August 29th. We'll see you.
Oh, my word.
So,
I couldn't believe how lucky.
so we
We camped that night.
puttered our gear up to a little campground on a raised overlook by Eli Cross, where we could see the road coming into town. next morning, here come our white station wagon, rolling down the road with them. So,
And they had planned to camp for a week and wait for us, just in case we were late.
so we loaded everything into the canoe, into the car. You remember our friends had taken their canoe and gear and had gone home. But as it happened, we met a guy in the campground where we were camping who was trying to figure out a way to hitchhike south.
Oh.
And so he said, well, he had a canoe and some gear, so we piled them in and away we went
Right.
down south, and I think it was Saskatchewan Highway 4, if I remember right. We got to a little place called Port of Morgan, Montana, which is the place where you cross from Canada into Montana. If you were a customs official in 1971 and saw a car like this and a crew like this and who looked like they'd been out in the woods for a few months, what would you have done? Well, we had to unload the car, and he had to spend some time looking up under the dash and in the wheelhouse and in our gear before he finally figured out that we really were telling the truth. As strange as it might be. And then we proceeded on our way, and when we got to the Montana open range country, we knew that we weren't on the Canadian Shield anymore. But we've been back a number of times since, and we're going to go back as long as we can.
The same trip?
To the boundary waters, but not the
Can I make a comment? Yeah. We showed a picture early on of the height of land portage between North and South Lake.
Right?
Have you been there recently?
No.
After 9/11, the people to know in Washington ordered the Border Patrol to clear cut all border portages 30 feet wide.
30 feet
If
wide.
you go there now, you see this ugly path.
Oh, really?
And the idea being that a terrorist coming from Canada to the U.S. could be spotted by a patrol plane, even though Congress, in all their wisdom, didn't give them any patrol planes. Plus the fact that who, if you know where the height of the land portage is located, could possibly walk overland from Canada to the United States through that wilderness. And who, if you heard a float plane, would cross the portage in the last place.
How wide is the clear cut there?
30 feet.
Only
It's
30.
shameful.
At least it's not 300.
Well, but still 30 looks
30 is
horrible.
plenty, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
So, did you want to show off some of your gear?
Oh, if you want to. I brought our cook kit and our reflector oven and the pack with the bear teeth.
Yeah.
Did you make some raspberry cobbler?
No, I didn't. Raspberry cobbler.
Maybe I'll,
Another fun part of the story is that the Duluth packs that went home with their friends that quit early are now in my possession. After garage clean out, so we could buy new cameras. So I get a little bit of the history too.
and did you put in a commercial for your canoe trip next fall?
Well, it's already full. We're taking a waiting list. Yeah, so I'm leading a
Great.
natural history paddle in boundary waters the
This
week
was my
after
father's.
Labor Day.
I turned the waiting list.
Great hat.
Shorter and easier.
I had that.
Goodwill or Salvation Army or whatever, but you know these old felt hats, they shed a lot of water and they keep the sun off and they don't get too bright. So we
All right.
very standard.
I like the feathers. Those are good.
Well, I wish I could say it was a 1971 feather, but this is a decades later turkey feather.
Who makes those hats?
Who makes them? I think Margaret's actually is a Stetson. Your hat.
I don't know, it was Dad's good felt hat.
Yeah, those are good.
Champ.
What is that?
Those are good.
Oh, the Palace Closures, Waterloo, Iowa.
All
I
right.
was thinking.
He has to put ties on them though, because in the wind, they would just blow right
Yeah.
off.
She has a question first, then I do.
Was it black flies that were the most aggravating for you?
Probably, yeah, the mosquito, there were plenty of mosquitoes too, but the black flies, well, if you've experienced black flies, they can be. Oh, no seams. We had a couple of nights on the infamous Winnipeg River. I was worrying much about the power dams and other things that I didn't think to mention the no-see-ums, but we had some nights where, you know, there
They
was.
come in through the tent street.
But it was early, I mean, that would be earlier in the spring,
Yeah.
probably.
Well, on the Winnipeg, that would have been June.
End of
Oh,
June.
yeah, later.
Yeah, mid-June, yeah. No-see-ums and black flies, yeah.
How much did your packs weigh?
Oh, well, the Voyageurs carried 90-pound packs. We would have done the same, wouldn't you?
were trying to imitate them, is that what you came?
The food pack was heavy.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you guys had heavy
Yeah.
cooking equipment.
Yeah.
I would probably 30 to 50 and maybe, well, you know, we hauled along, did you show the reflector oven?
No.
Yeah.
It depends on whether we had just
Yeah.
reprovisioned or not.
But yeah, we probably had some 60 or 70 pounds at least. The reflector oven, this is not lightweight.
It's not light, but you can cook a lot
We
with
had to
that.
protect it though, or it would get bent out of
Oh.
shape and then it wouldn't
But
stand up.
we,
Yeah.
we padded our backs by these, does anybody recognize these?
Sure, yes.
It's a kinder pad.
I'd take one.
We didn't want to carry heavy air mattresses along, so we said, well, you know, and this is before the day of thermarest.
Yeah.
So we got the kinder pad, you can buy these for $2 or something back then. Wasn't the best idea, you know, they're kind of noisy from,
Well, they weren't crunchy when we,
but anyway.
they got crunchy after. No, no. That's, we got asked that question quite a few
What's the
times.
question?
How many times have you dumped?
Oh.
And we didn't. We portaged. Or in the wind, we stopped.
There was one place, when our friends were still with us, that we were quite lucky. I think we went down a little small rapids first. We couldn't find the portage, later on we did find the portage, but we went down the small rapids first and we made it, and they came down and got hung up on a rock and literally
Went sideways.
crossways in the rapids, but they were still upright. And so I managed to wade out, waist deep, I guess, and get them off the rock and get them headed down, and they stayed upright and got on through the rapids.
Yeah, they were lucky.
That was,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
we
was
were
the scariest.
lucky, is the word.
Did you pretty much plan your food supplies that you'd make it, or were you aware or planning to replenish, because you knew these little
We knew
villages?
the Hudson's Bay Post.
Yeah, so you could
were
kind of
where they were.
organize.
Yeah, so we could figure out about how much to buy and.
In fact, where's the
So no
Hudson's
credit
Bay?
cards, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, this was ancient history, but traveler's checks, would you believe?
Oh, those worked. Yeah, those worked.
And this is a Hudson's Bay Company map, and I'm not sure if you can see these or not, but the little,
Put some lights.
there's Hudson's Bay Company stores at a whole lot of different areas.
Each of these little black,
Well, you maybe afterwards, if you want to look closer at
And
the.
you were aware of where
Yes.
those
Yeah.
were too, so that was
Yes.
good.
and we had addresses and, my mom could write letters and we would get a letter each time we came to.
And letters work.
Yeah, they did then.
Yeah.
You know, we sent the letter out to tell our friend when to come get us.
So your cell phone didn't work then?
You said that you stopped sooner than you at one time.
Yeah, what's that about?
So can you show me where you hoped to go and where you ended up getting out?
We ended up here.
Yeah, maybe I ought to pop that slide back up on the screen, would that be better?
No, that's good.
No,
No, that's good.
If you can hold it.
I think I
The,
can.
Yeah. Why did you stop when you?
it was end of August and he had to be
Ran out
back
of
at
time.
his job.
That was time. Keep back to the, oh.
Is that one more? Is that it? One more, one more.
That's it.
Okay. Lake Athabasca was where a lot of the fur trade area, or the fur trapping was done, up in here. And so a lot of the voyageurs stayed up there. Fort Chipewyan was one of the wintering areas. We had once thought we would get all the way up that far. The rest of the story is if you want to make the rest of the trip, once you get to the Clearwater River, it's downhill all the way, eventually by way of the McKenzie River to the Arctic Ocean. A friend in college had that idea, but we abandoned that idea. But one slight problem here is a 13-mile portage la Loc, or the meth portage is what the Voyageurs call it. We ran out of time, and you know, logistically, the road went to Eli Cross, and so that was the way to get back out. So but the Canadian Shield, as I hinted at, kind of runs roughly along here, which just kind of makes that route possible. You know, the Canadian Shield is what, 3.2 billion years old. It's kind of the oldest exposed land form in the world, I think, isn't it?
I don't know.
Is that, am I?
The center of the
No,
river.
it's all the continents have these shield areas. It's the one in Africa is older, but yeah, it's about like 3.8 billion or something.
But the routes just kind of coincide with the edge of the Canadian Shield. It's what sort of makes this route possible. And as Eric Moore said, the fur trade unrolled the map of Canada in the interior. This is 2,000 miles from Fort Chip to Grand Portage. And it was about 2,000, maybe not quite that far, from Grand Portage then to Montreal by way of the Great Lakes and the Ottawa River and that route.
And where did Eric Severin go with canoeing with the crew?
Oh, yeah. He started in Minnesota. Let's see, they went down the Minnesota River, and then they went.
So it was an entirely different route.
They went up. Oh, I think they went over the Heideland to the Red River, and then the Red River of the North. So I think they paddled. I'm trying to remember my geography. I used to know that story.
Did you get as much fish as what you were hoping for?
No, well, you know, fishermen never have all the fish they don't. But yeah, I've still got a little perch-colored bassarina. Everybody know what a bassarina is?
Upstream.
Yes, red and white.
It's so
Roll the bassarina, sometimes later on in the afternoon, roll the
I remember
bassarina.
every minute or two.
And sometimes when I'm lucky enough to catch a piece for supper, I caught smallmouth, walleyes, northerns, and I even caught a little muskie about this long. But yeah, we ate fish a fair amount.
Later on, especially. The fishing got better. First thing in the spring when it was raining and all that, it wasn't.
Well, and we didn't have good time.
How long did it take the Voyageurs to do 2,000 miles?
Don't even ask. Yeah, the record time on that 2,000-mile trip was, I think, somebody said 50 or 55 days. And they would start from Fort Chip, Oregon, go, some of them would go all the way 2,000 miles from Fort Chip down to Grand Portage and back all the way in one season. Sometimes the ones who went the farthest would have somebody meet them at Rainy River, Rainy Lake,
Yeah.
so they didn't have to go quite all the way to Grand Portage. They would turn around and go back just to make sure.
There's a 5-month frost, snow-free period in there where they had to get down and back.
So you guys was on upstream, okay?
Yeah.
And if you come any other ways, all downstream, for the most part.
And some of you know the book, Sigurd Olsen's book, Lonely Land. He talks about a trip, and they started, I think they started a deal all across maybe, but they went downstream, which was the sensible way to go. We thought, well, we want to start in the spring at Grand Portage, it would be easier to, the ice would go out sooner, and we once had thought we were going to try to get all the way to Lake Athabasca, so the last 500 miles of the trip would be downstream. Well, we ended on the uphill leg, and we 500 miles downstream.
So this is the rest of the cook kit. So there's 4 cups in here. I added coolant bowls for bowls, and then we had 2 lids. We could
So did you hang your food out of the tree limb then?
You know, we didn't.
Fashion, we don't have.
You're
those.
kidding,
We
you
were-
didn't need to?
And I made the little
We didn't have
covers
any,
so that
any
you
bear
didn't get the
problems.
black on the
Other
inside
than
pot
the
because
one
they were
that-
nested
One at the
together.
canoe.
So, we did everything all black.
We did have a few smaller critter problems. We took along some beef jerky that we made, and one cold night, I think maybe we thought that was gonna be our supper, we took the jerky in the tent with us, and the critters chewed in to get into our, chewed in through the screen of the tent.
Yeah,
and
we
they
never
went through
took
the
food
back.
in the tent again.
So where did you leave your food if you didn't hang it from a tree branch then?
Well, sometimes in the canoe, thinking that the critters wouldn't crawl into the canoe and get it, but tell them
But they didn't crawl in to get it.
well, however they got into the,
Yeah, they got into our food several times in several different campsites. And one was a used bacon sack, an empty bacon sack, and the brown sugar and my tampon supply.
but they did not eat the pilot biscuits.
Oh, yeah. There was one night when they had that choice and they didn't do it.
Everything else.
Yeah.
So no freeze dried.
We had a couple of our emergency meals that were freeze-dried,
So
and we
there was-
ate that last week as we were coming in. We didn't eat it on a regular basis.
I'm floored that you
We-
didn't have more bear.
I'm
problems.
shocked.
I was afraid we couldn't get it up there. I didn't want to count on it.
No, I'm floored that you didn't have more bear
Bear
problems
problems,
with
yeah.
fresh
With your food,
food,
no.
especially
And-
bacon. I mean,
Especially bacon, yeah.
In Indian country, though, the Indians can shoot what game they want, when they want it,
Yeah.
mostly, at that time anyway. So we didn't really, occasionally we saw a couple
Oh, okay, so
moose
they were
and,
hunted, so.
Yeah.
one or two times we saw bears, but, the Indians kind of keep the critters, at bay, which helped. So, yeah.
Another question is, so what kind of camping, canoe tripping experience did you have before you made this long trip?
Our summers at the field station on Basswood Lake and in the Boundary Waters. And
But those were like 6-day trips or something at the field
Yeah.
station.
Yeah,
That
well,
was-
that,
What the hell were you thinking?
I was young and easily impressionable.
but Margaret and I had spent our honeymoon on a canoe trip in the Boundary Waters.
He had a habit of going to the Boundary Waters every year since he,
Oh, yeah, I know
in
somebody
college
like
and
that.
whatever. Well, the year we got married, he hadn't had time to go, so the only time we could go was if we went on our honeymoon. So our honeymoon had to be the canoe trip.
You're a good sport.
So these are the original plates. Go down in the bottom.
They look brand new.
And this lid happens to fit on this pan. Mom found this in her cupboard, and she also had this pan. This was our pudding pan that we mixed up with our pudding.
And you're still using that?
Yeah.
Parts of that cookit came on the my inaugural trip to the museum last September
big pot.
too.
I don't know
Yeah,
what
I
else
borrowed a couple. I think the medium pot too. So it's definitely still in use. They just don't make them like they used to.
They wasted.
Asking about freeze-dried foods, this was 1971, and yeah, there were some available, but the selection wasn't very good, and the price was pretty high. In fact, we even initially had inquired about, mailing freeze-dried foods to different places to have the supply there to pick up when we got there, and finally decided that the Hudson's Bay Company, whatever they had we could eat, was the best option, and that worked out okay. And I still like peanut butter and jelly.
We ate a lot.
I had some at breakfast this morning.
Well, we can see why you produce somebody like Emily.
Nature girl.
Yes.
She didn't get to canoe till she was, 16 or something?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's okay if we don't take our 6 and 8-year-old?
No, I no. I'm mad that I didn't get to go earlier, but I've made up for it.
She hasn't forgiven us for that, for depriving her of canoeing for the first 14 or 15 years of her life.
Yeah, we did a lot of paddling on the Turkey River near our house, so I did some other
Didn't get her to
day canoe trips
You didn't
and
get to
stuff.
learn
But,
why.
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, are we about ready to eat here? I don't want to.
Yeah, it's probably time to rearrange ourselves. So thanks a lot for coming all the way up and for telling me.